It's like little Elizabeth. Elizabeth was a small, petite woman. And this guy, Tony, just assaulted her again and again and raped her over and over. They did nothing. Except one day, suddenly, they transferred her to the Hobson. Not long after she moved in there, she was found in her bathtub, strangled to death, having been raped.
Thanks so much for meeting with me today. So I usually ask folks that I'm interviewing to just introduce yourself and tell us where you're at.
Well, I'm Tim, and I live in DSC, housing.
And so we're in Seattle, Washington. And Tim and I have been connected with each other for about the last 3.5 or 4 years.
No, leave that alone. Leave that alone. Come on, leave that alone. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Free.
She got her way. So Tim and I have been connected for the last about 3.5 years or so through social media.
About the time you graduated.
About the time I graduated from the University of Washington.
You were on...
Coma.
Yeah, the Battle for the Soul of Seattle.
Fight for the Soul of Seattle.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's probably almost 4 years ago, I guess. So Tim, just tell me a little bit about yourself, about where are you from? Are you from Washington State?
No, I'm originally from Southern California. I was born in Corona. How about that? Isn't that ironic? I've had the coronavirus 3 times. Yeah, the crown. And I was raised pretty much in Long Beach, although I did live in Guantanamo from 64 to 68 as a Navy dependent. I was born in a Navy hospital.
So military has been part of your life for a long time.
Yes, it has. Okay, I was in Army ROTC. I went to Polytechnic High School, Long Beach, and I was on the match team, in JROTC. I got into a car accident, when I was 17. My family had no insurance. My mother got the bill, and I joined the Army for 4 years.
And how old were you when you joined the Army?
17.
Oh, 17.
And the 4th year carried a $2,500 bonus, so in 1974, that was pretty good money.
Yeah.
As soon as I graduated from artillery school, I got $2,000 of that. Uncle Sam took $500.
Okay.
And I sent that home to my mother and half my base pay for a year and a half. Paid off the 4 cars that I totaled.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So I spent 4 years in the Army. And it was in the Army where I met my wife. I've only been married once.
Yeah. How long were you married?
13 years we were together. Yeah. And she went through hell because I was deployed a lot.
Yeah.
So I met her in Colorado Springs, and then I immediately was transferred to Korea for a year.
Okay.
Where I spent time in my year up on the Miller tribe, so 76 to 77. And then went to the 101st Airborne and then was discharged. Went to Colorado, went to school a little bit. First time in higher education. Did a bunch of different little jobs. The only job I've ever had that I woke up and really look forward going to was a prep cook and a bartender at a Shakey's Pizza Parlor.
Oh.
I loved that job.
That's awesome.
Yeah, didn't pay shit though.
Yeah.
So
why'd you love it so much?
Because I worked independently, doing all the prep, making the sausage and the doughs and cutting everything up and all that kind of stuff. And everything was ready for the people when they came in on shift. And we first ate, and then the lunch crowd came in, served 3-2 beer, so 18-year-olds could drink there.
Okay.
And
this was in Colorado?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And they had they had the soda pop, all you could drink pitchers, and I just loved serving those kids who came up, feeling so important to get drinks from the table and stuff like that. It was just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. But I needed more money than that, so I decided I'd take a position at AMAX Millennium. It's up in Leadville, where I'd go in at 12,000 feet elevation and go down 2,000 feet to the same elevation where I lived in Frisco, and blew up rocks all day. A couple of near cave-ins, and I decided I needed to find a different job. I was making $10.60 an hour in 1979.
That's good money.
That was good money then.
Really good money.
So my wife, she was extremely pissed. And I told her I'm going to go to California, where I'm from, and see if I can find a job. I stayed with my mom out there and looked for work and had a couple of offers to refineries, but couldn't make it the transportation connections. I left my car with my wife, with the kids. I needed a paycheck, so I decided I know where I can get one in 2 weeks. I went down and first saw the Marine recruiter, and he said, "You got to go to basic training." I said,
Yeah.
I stepped over to the
You
next
already
desk.
did that.
Yeah, I stepped over to the next desk to the Navy recruiter, and he said, "No, you don't have to, and you can join for just 2 years, okay?" And that's what I did. I signed up for 2 years. My wife was livid.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she hated the military. She hated the idea of, me being deployed and her, taking care of things in places that were strange.
Yeah.
And she did that. In the time that I was in the military, the 16 years, I was deployed 5 years day for day. A year in Korea and 4 years at sea. So that was difficult. 7 years we were together. And of course I missed birthdays, anniversaries, you name it. Finally she had enough. I was injured, in an accident, and she couldn't take any more.
Did you guys have kids?
Yeah, we had 3. I had a stepson and my 2 daughters that we had. Our first child died, my son. And so that was hard too.
Your first child dies?
Yes. Yep. I wasn't there when he was delivered into this world, and I wasn't there when he died. My wife, she had to deal with it alone. Because, she wasn't in Colorado. But that's where she went back to when we separated.
So she was alone in Whidbey Island then?
When I was deployed from Whidbey Island, yes. Yeah, that was my first duty station, was Whidbey Island, and then my last. Of course, she wasn't with me, when I was stationed here for the last tour. And we came up here right after Mount St. Helens blew.
Oh, yeah, I remember that time.
Then we drove down, alongside the Columbia River through the Dells and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a mess.
Yeah. So that was a long time ago. So you decided to stay in Washington after your wife divorced you?
Well, see, I was medically retired in 1990, so I was entered in 87. I was on shore duty, and when it came time for me to rotate to sea duty, they said, "You can't go to sea with your injury." And they wouldn't allow me limited duty for the last 4 years to do 20, okay? So they transferred me to what they call the Temporary Disabled Retired List, TDRL. Pretty much put you on reserve, kind of, in a way. And from there, either you're permanently retired or you're let go, all right? Your disability rating has to stay above 30%. They dropped mine from 50 to 25. Wasn't even a medical doctor on the board, much less a neurologist, Mine was head injury. So I found myself here in Washington State, believing that there was no way out, because I had to have a job, I had to have a house, I had to have something to land. So I stayed here. The VA sent me to school, and I got my second bachelor's at Western, and it was for teaching school. I never wanted to teach adolescents. Okay, my practicum at Anacortes High School was enough to cure me. Okay, so I didn't. bring about any advancement for me. So I did different things. I'm a journeyman pipe fitter. I did shutdowns over in Marsh Point. I worked at Nichols Brothers Boat Builders in Freeland, building garden class tugs. I'm a journeyman CNC machinist. 4-year apprenticeship program. That was the last job that I held. And both times I
Here in Washington?
Yes, I was laid off twice, okay? Once in 2009, for that economic turndown. And we never had a recovery. In 2015, I was released again because of economic problems. And after that, I applied for over 200 jobs. I got one job interview and offered 6 hours a week at a Burger King up on 130th. 6 hours a week, yeah. That would just screwed up my food stamps.
So, yeah, I think that's something that I'd like us to talk about a little bit too, maybe during part of this. So
I was, the economic turndown, okay, put me behind in my rent. A lady that I rented from, she owned the apartment complex I was in. She died from shingles. Her husband didn't want to manage it any longer, turned it over to a property management company. They didn't honor the repayment program.
Yeah.
Okay, and demanded rent in full and began eviction processes. I still had my job, making $35 an hour at that point, and a couple of cars. I tailored that down to one car that was an Explorer that I went to live in when I was evicted.
Mm-hmm.
So I went homeless before I lost my job. I was clean and sober at that point.
You were clean and sober?
Yes.
So, and what kind of substances were you using before that to push you into getting clean and sober?
Well, my wife and I, we did a lot of cocaine back in, the
Feel like
78,
we all did.
yeah, 78, 79, 81, okay,
Yeah.
for 3 years. And I found myself, standing on some guy's porch at 3 o'clock in the morning to buy a dime line, okay? And I asked myself, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
Went back, my wife and I talked about it, and we both stopped using hard drugs at that point.
Yeah.
We still drank alcohol and smoked marijuana.
Yeah.
That was until, the Navy instituted the urinalysis, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, the United States Navy was the point man on that whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I stopped smoking pot until, 1990. And I got a DUI in 1990 that I decided...
It helped you out a little bit?
Yeah, I got clean and sober right there at that point. So I'd already been off a hard drug since 81.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
For 9 years.
So you knew what to do?
Yeah, so when I relapsed, okay, in 2015, September, I was bored, sitting in my vehicle, had relatively no money.
Were you homeless at this time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I went homeless in 2014.
In 2014, because you couldn't get another job?
No, I was still employed at that point.
Oh.
And I maintained that job for nearly a year.
Yeah.
Until the company switched hands and the new owners, they didn't like, their machinist living in his car in whatever parking lot,
Yeah.
Even though I was always early to work.
Yeah.
By a half hour. I worked through my breaks and through my lunch. But people they don't receive homelessness well.
Yeah.
Don't. So that was the last job I had.
When you ended up homeless, did you try to get help from any kind of agency?
Oh, well, yeah, of course, I'm a veteran, so I went to the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs, okay, and the King County Veterans Programs. They were both in the same office.
Yeah.
On 2nd and Lenore.
Uh-huh.
Just on the first floor, and DSHS is on the second floor. So I started with them, okay, and I took a risk assessment. Apparently that score wasn't high enough, okay, because I remained homeless for over 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't live in places like the jungle, okay?
You did?
I did not.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, and let me ask you about that, because in my experience, if you're economically displaced, anybody I've ever worked with in the industry who is a client, who is considered a client, if they're economically displaced, they're not going to be in encampments. If they're not in a shelter trying to get out of homelessness, they're living in their car trying to get out of homelessness.
Right.
What's your
And
perspective on that?
that's what I did until SPD decided that they would impound my car
Yeah.
and sell it in 21 days. There was such a price tag I couldn't afford it. What's my perspective on that is I couldn't live like those people do.
Yeah.
So I lived out of a backpack and I kept on the move. I found that if I spent too much time in one place, people would begin to harass me.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not, the SPD, if I only had 2 tents. I put them up one time each, okay, and they were on me like that,
Yeah.
So I just lived out of my rucksack, which is a backpack a little bit larger than that one right there, Army rucksack.
Yep.
And the only time I carried any bags with me is when I first bought food.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was food that I was carrying. Otherwise, everything was contained.
In your pack.
Yes. And I slept on private property at times, sometimes in the parks. Parks are open, general park hours in Seattle are open from 4 a.m. to 11:30 p.m.
Yeah.
So there's only that period from 11:30 till 4 a.m. that you can be considered trespassing.
Yes.
Okay. So as long as you're not in the park at that time or discovered in the park at that time, really nobody can say anything.
Yeah.
Well, I was so harassed, okay, that I read all of the park rules and regulations and discovered that the maintenance workers and those people who work in the recreation centers and all that stuff, they've never read a word of it.
Mm.
So they come up with things, off the fly, You
So
can't
they
be
don't
here.
actually know policy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like I know exactly, okay, Seattle Municipal Code, 18.12.255 is about discrimination. Parks are open to all. Nobody shall be discriminated against, okay? But you find that homeless are discriminated against continually.
Do you think all homeless people are functioning in the same way on the streets?
No, not at all, okay? Some people have become so settled, okay, in their way that they don't see any other, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I saw things then and I see things now that are incomprehensible to me, okay?
Of the people that you've ever seen in those encampments like the jungle or any of the other garbage-filled encampments, how many of those people, in your experience, are drug addicts?
I'd say the majority.
Close to 100%?
And if they aren't using drugs, they're drinking alcohol.
Right.
Yeah, so they're pretty close, yeah.
So you ended up living in the Estelle building, which is a downtown emergency service center, permanent supportive housing building, correct?
Right.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
How did you end up there?
Through the coordinated entry program. See, I'm a veteran, like I said, and my housing coordinators were from the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs and the King County Veterans Program. I had 2 of them. And
And let me ask you one other question before that. Do you have a criminal history?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was just wondering because based on a lot of your history, it sounds like your coordinated entry score would be kind of low.
It was.
Yeah.
So I'd been homeless, okay, before they came to me and said you might want to revisit doing that assessment, okay?
Did they coach you to sort
Jack
of
my score?
embellish your story?
They pretty much did it for me,
Okay.
okay, because I don't lie. Whatever the high risk was, okay, being
became
beat up
that.
all the time, yes, I became all of that.
Yeah.
They first offered me housing in Plymouth Housing, 55 plus, down there on 3rd and Lenore, the same building that the Reach office is in.
Yep.
And I rejected that. I've been very clear. I don't want anything in the downtown core.
Yep.
Okay. I really prefer to be on the periphery somewhere. Well, my housing coordinators went on a Christmas vacation, December 2017.
Okay.
Both of them did, and they left a young man in charge. He didn't bother to read my record or any of that kind of stuff, or he would have never thrown my name in the hat for this brand new building, okay? when they came back and they told me, my housing coordinators avoided me, okay, because they knew I would be pissed.
Yeah.
I was familiar with DESC, not because I was a client, but because I had visited people who lived in the Morrison.
Oh yeah, right down there on 3rd and James.
Yeah, so, any
So
mention of
everybody knows about DESC if you're in the system at all.
right. So, I would go there and visit, people that lived there. And this was the last thing that I could imagine, but I was pretty much intimidated or manipulated into taking this apartment. I did not want it. I did not want to live under the thumb of DESC.
What was the process like when they told you that you had housing and then it was time for you to move in? What was that process like for you?
Well, I didn't want to come here,
Yeah.
okay? And they told me if I didn't come, all right, that they had to wash their hands of me. They would give me gas cards to any place I wanted to go. Of course, I didn't have a vehicle. SPD took that, Gas cards would be useless. So it was either, no option for housing and live on the streets, or take this apartment and have a roof over my head.
So, okay, so you've lived there since the building opened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so
I was
how
the
long?
first resident.
When was that?
I moved in on February 26th of 2018. The grand opening with Mayor Durkin's news conference was on the morning of the 27th.
Okay.
I was the first one to spend a night in that place. I was the first one to sign a lease. I'm the longest standing resident.
So, and as people started to move into the building, how was the environment shifting? What kind of people were moving in?
Oh my God, okay. I mean, it became, it was a free-for-all, okay? I mean, as far as theft, all right? And that still goes on, only they pretty much exhausted, okay, all the property that out of there. Everybody down to nothing, okay? But they would steal from each other and be best friends with each other the next day, you see?
So
Okay?
there were a lot of drug addicts coming in?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Okay?
What about
So-
older folks? What about older vulnerable folks?
Okay, so people over the age of 50, okay, that's a vulnerable age, okay, also covered by the Violence Against Women's Act, probably about 50%.
Okay.
Yeah, younger than that, mid-20s tops.
Mid-20s.
Yeah, at the bottom.
And so when they say permanent supportive housing, what kind of freedom do you have to change buildings if you want to?
Oh, I'm not going to get a transfer. I've tried, okay, over the years
So
to
you've
get a
tried?
transfer. Oh, yes, many times.
And
in
you've been
different
denied?
ways. Oh, yeah, always.
Yeah, after being homeless on the streets for 4 years, why did you want to move out of that building?
Oh, well, there's a number of reasons.
Yeah.
One, there's no supports.
So
we were promised to have medical. We were promised to
go.
have transportation. We were promised to have services. Okay, like
And what do you mean by services?
well, if somebody wanted to go to treatment, okay, there would be chemical dependency support, and referral.
Is that inside of those buildings?
Chemical dependency person, I think, comes out of 500 wells, down where Sage is.
Do they
But
help
they
people
travel.
get clean and sober
I ain't never seen nobody get clean and sober
in 6 years?
in 6 years, and I've tried to go to treatment for 4 of those.
How many units are inside of that building?
91,
How many deaths have you seen over a 6-year period
over 60.
inside of the building?
No, not so much inside of the building, but people have been transported to the hospital and perished there as well.
Perished in the or from
Right.
the building, residents.
Right, and then some have gone downtown and perished downtown.
How
But
many
they're gone.
people that you know in the building over the 6 years that you've been there since the building opened have you seen want to try to improve their life and ask for support from the staff? Have you seen any of that?
I know a woman, okay, that lives there right now, and I knew her while I was housed, okay, in Renton.
Before you became homeless?
Yes, okay. And then when I became homeless, I saw her up on North Aurora, okay, where I stayed, okay, I stayed up there. And then she moved into this apartment building. She has been attempting to go to treatment for as long as she has lived in that building.
And how does a person go about attempting to go to treatment in the building?
Well, I happened to be visiting with her when the CD, the current chemical dependency lady, okay, licensed, okay, showed up at her door, okay, and they were talking about getting her a bed for treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 9 months ago, 6 months.
She hasn't gone to treatment yet?
No, and she's disintegrating
Yeah.
very quickly.
How
As a
much-
matter of fact, when Deborah got here, when I first met her, okay, I mean, she was a bomb, man, you know, figure and all the rest of that, right? And but when she moved in here, she must have weighed all of 85 pounds. She was a walking skeleton. He did nothing to help her. You know, when I bought her aminos and proteins and all kinds of stuff and muscle milk, none of that did any good. Anything that she took down, she would immediately come back up. And she was out one day, out and weak, and she collapsed, and she went to the hospital, and they discovered she had corona. And while she was being treated for corona, okay, and also starvation, they discovered that when she had her stomach stapled at one point, it collapsed and it cut off her stomach. So the only food that she could get down would stop at the entry to her stomach, okay, and back up into her esophagus. But had they had medical here or anybody concerned, okay, they may have been able to intervene long before that. She just happened to get COVID and collapse.
Yeah, thankfully, right?
Yes, and a strong woman she is, okay, to survive all of that. Do you understand?
Yeah. How,
But see, she's not going to survive much longer.
you don't think she's going to survive much longer?
You know, she's drinking herself to death. She's an alcoholic, and she's drinking herself to death, and she's been trying to go to treatment.
And they're not helping her?
Not helping her.
How many people have you seen in that condition in this building?
Oh, many, and we have another lady, okay, that I adore, okay, and her body's swole up. I mean, huge. She's gone into the hospital a number of times. And, you know, it's either her brain or her liver's going to give out. You know.
And there's no intervention with the supportive staff in this permanent supportive building?
None. The problem is that the only thing they offer is mental health, and mental health, they throw pills at them.
Let me ask you this, the mental health professionals that come into the building to help, what is the average age range of those folks?
There aren't mental health that come into those buildings. We're supposed to have a mental health counselor, but they fired the last one. So they said that she made a racial slur, and that woman wouldn't have said shit if she had a mouthful of it, okay?
Yeah.
And she was not racist by any stretch of the imagination. But she also didn't agree with what was going on inside of that building.
And when you say what was going on, what do you mean? I mean, are you talking about all the things that you're talking about, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, imagine, okay, a person who has dissociative personality disorder, or separation anxieties, who grew up in an environment where they had nothing and they began to hoard. When you take every bit of their frickin' property, what do you think that would do to them mentally?
Oh, probably break them down, make them angry.
Make them angry, that's one thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And they'd even become that more disassociative.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know one woman that it's happened 5 times to.
Do they teach you at all inside of these buildings how to, as folks?
Oh, by the way, the only mental health workers that I see are King County mental health crisis workers, okay? Coming to involuntary commit
detain
somebody.
someone.
Yeah.
Do they teach you guys anything, budgeting and finance? Do they help secure or prepare people for employment?
No, and that's what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be helping people become self-sufficient, okay?
Is there any kind of self-sufficiency training that happens inside of these buildings?
There's nothing of that sort that happens, okay? The only activities that we have are sporadic bingo, you know, that really isn't bingo.
Do you feel like it's more like a nursing home on steroids?
There's no nursing. There's no nurses. I mean,
How much fentanyl is in the building?
Basically, everybody there uses fentanyl, but a handful.
And what about meth and crack?
Meth and crack, those are the handful.
When somebody comes to visit, what if somebody's coming to look at the building? What happens? Do they fix it up to look different? Do they make?
Oh yeah, if they know, and they get they get a heads up when Seattle Housing Authority's coming through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is what this guy's been doing, okay? He's been sprucing up the outside, okay? You're removing, the graffiti and stuff, off the pillars and the side, getting the glass, because you have psychotics in there that bust out the windows continually, okay? Six stories up and glass raining down, it's onto a public sidewalk.
Do you see open drug use in the building?
Oh yeah, most certainly.
How often do you see law enforcement, fire trucks, EMTs, SWAT teams daily? More than once a day?
More than once a day, and yeah, mostly. But at least daily.
The entire time?
The entire time. I can't imagine what our neighbors think. But see, I already know, okay, that they don't like us, all right? And they assume that everybody there is severely mentally disordered, okay?
Yeah.
Which is what DASC says. That's what they put out in the public.
Right, that's who they predominantly worked with originally.
Right. Our clients are predominantly severely mentally ill and polysubstance disorder. Yeah. So that's the way our community views us. Well, it doesn't help, okay, when we have, a young lady dancing, in her window, okay, or when they throw, the TV through their window, 6 stories up. It doesn't help much. Or we got another fellow that walks in the neighborhood, a couple of them actually, okay, cussing it, as loud as they possibly can, and at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning when these people need to go be asleep, go to work. We've had a number of people. It's just a couple now that do B&Es and car prowls and all that stuff, and they shit where they eat. Trust me. Yeah, it's a horrible place.
And let me ask you this: have you ever seen any kind of violence or sexual assault or things like that inside of the buildings?
Rapes occur. Okay, in 2019. I filed 8 complaints with the city. Okay, I wrote a 9th that said, "Don't pencil whip this." And it took them a few months to close them out, but they never came out to inspect anything. And
so, where you reported these things?
Yes, and at that time, I had no idea that that Seattle Housing Authority was the public housing authority underneath of HUD, between HUD and DESC. So when they came through on an inspection, I handed those complaints off to one of the inspectors from Seattle Housing Authority.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was in 2019?
They closed out those complaints. 2 of those complaints had to do with security. Now, the door frames around the doors, okay, the metal door frames themselves are the weakest point to the entire security of that door, because there's nothing to back them up. It's 14 gauge galvanized steel, which is fairly thin, that's been like bent, okay, and formed, all right, and your door fits in there, okay? Yeah. So your door and the jamb, okay, like this right here, there's a little gap there. You get a piece of flat iron about that long, you put it in there, and you pry, even though the deadlock goes into 1/2 inch is required by city ordinance, okay? You put that flat iron in there, and you pry, and it will clear, that deadbolt will clear that frame, because it will bow on the outward side. So where your hinges are, it's bowing on that side, as well as where the pry bar is when you pry. Those doors pop right open. When I first moved in, the linkages for the deadbolts weren't even hooked up. Okay, you got single key, for the soft lock and for the deadbolt. Okay, the linkages weren't hooked up to the deadbolts. I discovered it, and I went down and I told this one lady, I said, "Lock yourself in your office." She did. I took my plastic card and opened that door. I said, "There's something seriously wrong here."
Yeah. And it's the same with the units?
Yeah, the units, yeah. It was my unit that I discovered, okay, because somebody had opened my door.
So I want to share a little thought with you. So the Housing First policy and the pushers of the Housing First policy here specifically in Seattle say that these permanent supportive housing buildings support dignity and respect of the individuals who were previously homeless, that they create equity for people. What is your perspective on that?
My perspective is this, is that they are dehumanizing is what they are. Those buildings, okay, harm reduction, for instance, this is a harm reduction building.
Yeah, so what does that mean for you?
What that means
What does that mean under the policy, and what does that mean for you as a resident that lives in one of these buildings?
What that means is that they're supposed to be making, using the drugs safer, with the supplies and that type of thing, okay? But that's not what the reality is.
What
the
is
harm
the reality?
reduction is the harm that's being done to the community. You take those people out of the community with their drugs, with their paraphernalia, with their junk, and you put them into one of these buildings, and the community doesn't have to
see it.
Doesn't have to see it.
Do you think that people are safer?
And you said it on the battle for the soul of Seattle, okay? That when they go into these buildings, what do?
They're swept under the rug. You shut the door behind them.
And they die. And they commit crime.
They do. They perpetrate.
It's like that woman I was telling you, April, was assaulted by this dude that stands, 3 feet taller than her. And witnessed by staff. And then he takes another person, basically captive in his apartment and beats the brakes off of her. And there he is, right back in there. It's like the violence that's committed there, the rapes. These women don't want to report the rapes.
Why is that?
Because the judges release those people right back into the same place with a zero contact, no contact order. A 0 foot, okay? Meaning that they can be right up to them, skin tight, but not say a word.
Yeah.
Okay? And then it's like Erica, she's not with us anymore, but her boyfriend had beat the brakes off her, and he went to jail for it, okay? And the judge released him right back to this building. And he went right back to her, and he says, "I'm going to kill you, bitch." And the next thing is she woke up a week later in Harborview with a broken over bone, her face, and I've seen it too many times. I mean, it's like little Elizabeth. Elizabeth was a small, petite woman. And this guy, Tony, just assaulted her again and again and raped her over and over. They did nothing. Except one day, suddenly, they transferred her to the Hobson. Not long after she moved in there, she was found in her bathtub, strangled to death, having been raped.
I'm really sorry to hear that.
That's why I say when I walk those halls. That's my freezer. My freezer, Elizabeth put a 1211, or what do you call it, still?
A 211.
211 in my freezer, and it fell over, right? So that puddle's frozen there. I won't defrost it, I won't remove it. I have been diagnosed with pre-service, in-service, and post-service PTSD. But nothing in my lifetime, trauma, combat, I don't care what it is, compares to the loss that I suffered here. Yeah. Somebody said, "Well, what about grief counseling?" I'd be fine if the deaths stopped happening, and then I could grieve those that have happened. But grief counseling, when the traumas continue to go on,